So I wanted to talk to you guys today about what we read in the first reading from the book of Proverbs and what this particular reading is trying to teach us. And the thing is that there are some things in this reading that are said quite explicitly, a teaching, a message that is very clear when we encounter it and when we simply just read it. But there's some things underneath also that are kind of implicit that we have to do a little bit of digging to really kind of get it out and to really understand the full scope of what we just read a few moments ago. And so I'd like to do that. And really, the best place, in my humble opinion, to go in order to understand what we read from Proverbs is we got to go all the way back to the book of Genesis. To understand. Now, you may be shocked. Now don't worry, I'm not gonna start at Genesis and end at Proverbs and cover everything between, so don't worry. We're just going back to Genesis to see, because there's some things that happened, particularly towards the beginning of Genesis, that helps us understand what Proverbs, what this book, what Christ is trying to tell us through this reading. And so, we're gonna go back to the story of Adam and Eve. Right? And you all are good Catholics, good Christians. You all are going to be good Catholics when you come into full communion. And so you probably already know the story of Adam and Eve. So I'm not going to retell the whole thing, but I'm going to tell you just about the little part when they went into the garden and they ate that little fruit. So you know, God made Adam, God made Eve. He said, you can have anything in the garden. It's all yours. You can eat whatever except this one little plant, this one little tree. And of course, they went right for it, right? Because when you're told no, you can't help yourself. And so they went, and Eve goes to this tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And there's a serpent there, the enemy, and the enemy is like, you should have this. It tastes good. God told you not to eat it. What does he know? He's just God. Take a bite. And then, of course, Eve takes the fruit from the tree. And by the way, time out. So, as a note, I hate it when people call it an apple. It wasn't an apple. It never says in the Bible it was an apple. Just quick little history lesson and language lesson from Father Padilla. So, the word in Latin for apple, or in many Latin-based languages, is mela, right? The word for evil is male. And so you just flip the A and the E, and you have a nice literary device and a mnemonic device to understand eat the fruit, bad, evil, etc. So, but it wasn't actually an apple. Apples are good. They're very healthy for you, right? An apple a day keeps the doctor, dentist away, whatever the phrase is. I don't know phrases, but apples are good. Eat your apples, okay? So, however, what we're talking about is not an apple. Time back in. So she ate this fruit, right? She committed the first sin by eating this fruit. And then what happened? She goes to her husband, because the husbands are always close by to their wives, and she says, hey, Adam, this is really good. Take a bite. And what does Adam do? Takes a bite. He's a good husband, listens to his wife. You can laugh at that, it's true. A good husband should listen to their wives, right? And so husbands are like, and so he ate the fruit. So with that kind of story in our minds, that little frame of reference that we have, we can then understand now some reality, some truths that Proverbs is trying to tell us. The first one overall that we have to understand is that, and this is true, that women have tremendous influence over men. And more specifically, wives have tremendous influence over their husbands. Would you agree? Yeah, the wives are like, yeah, I do. The husbands are like, yeah, she does. All right, but it's true. That's just a reality. Look, I'm not even married and I know that, so it's okay for you to admit it. It's fine. That's just the fact of the matter, right? That women have, and wives have tremendous influence over men and their husbands, right? And so we see in this story here, right, what happens. Right? We see, and the second, I'll say this. And the reason for that, especially between husbands and wives, is because the husband has entrusted his heart to her, has given her full reign over his very being. We'll get to that in a second. But this influence is important. So we see the overall thing is that women have tremendous influence over their husbands. Husbands would like to they'd rather not admit it, but it's true. You know it's true. I know it's true. Your wives definitely know it's true. So let's just cut the crap and just call it like it is, okay? So that's true. So the second point of this, though, right, is that as we see in Proverbs here, wives, you have to use that power for good. Proverbs here very clearly states, and we can see it also via the via negativa in this story from Adam and Eve, that the influence, Proverbs shows you what a good wife should do for their husband in positively influencing their lives. But we see with Eve and Adam how Eve, who committed the first sin, then led her husband into sin. Now, as a note, I don't want any nudge, nudge, wink, wink, see, Father said that you led me into sin. No, that's not what I'm saying. We'll get to that in a second. But the reality is, though, is with great power in this say comes the tremendous responsibility that wives, you have over your husbands to lead them to sanctity and holiness, to be an example and a model for them and for your entire family of holiness, of sanctity, of virtue. It is indeed a tremendous responsibility, but it's inborn into who you are. The second thing, now we have to go to, we see that from for the wives, moving on to the husbands, very clearly, and I said this before, but let's point it out again. We see kind of really two or three things here. One, it says very clearly in Proverbs, her husband entrusting his heart to her. Because that's what happened, gentlemen, at your wedding day when you made those vows, when you spoke those vows face to face before God and man. You entrusted your heart to her. And gentlemen, there's nothing you could do to get that heart back. You can't just take it back. That's not how that works. She has your heart. And we've just talked about her responsibility to hold it, to take care of it. But the reality is, you've given her your heart, entrusted it to her, and now you have to cherish her and respect her. And that's the second part there, is that husbands, in entrusting your heart, you're called to then cherish her and love her and uphold her and remind her of her sanctity and dignity. And we see in what happens in Genesis, Adam did not do that. Think about this. Eve had just committed the first sin and gave the fruit over to Adam. Adam, who did not yet sin, failed to uphold the sanctity and the dignity of his wife. She failed in her model, in being a model of holiness. And it's okay to admit she wasn't perfect. No one is. She failed in her model of holiness, and her husband then had the job to uphold her, to say, look, honey, you fell, but I'm going to hold you up. He didn't do that. He failed at his task. And so we see here this mutual, even reciprocal failure to live up to their vocation. And so husbands, even if your wife maybe isn't a perfect model of holiness for you, that does not give you an excuse to not be one for her. And in fact, the Lord clearly says in Proverbs through the story of Adam and Eve that you are to hold her up and remind her of her sanctity and dignity, even if she happens to have forgotten it, and to cherish her at all times, no matter what. Because you've given her yourself. You are one. And so we can see then, right, that you guys who have been called to marriage, we believe that it is a vocation. It is just as much of a vocation, if not more, than a call to be a priest or a nun or whatever. That it is called, that you are called by God to influence your husband, to uphold and cherish your wives. That is the reason why God made you husbands and wives, to be mutual models of sanctity. And when one falls down, it's a covenant, so you raise the other up. That's why God made you. And so we see that you must not be like Adam and Eve, but you must uphold the lofty expectations of Proverbs, to be mutual models of holiness for each other, to positively influence, patiently sometimes, your husbands, to bring them on the road of holiness with you, and husbands, to make sure that you at all times respect and dignify and uphold the sanctity of your wives. So do it.